Hello friends, this is Manoj Bhuktani. I welcome you all on behalf of the Edupedia world. So guys, this is the fourth video presentation relating to the topic mutual funds. And by now we have already covered more than 80% of the topics relating to chapter mutual funds. This is the last video presentation in which we'll be discussing about the topics relating to chapter mutual funds, in which we'll be covering the remaining 20% of our topics. And certainly in our next video presentation, we'll be discussing about the practical questions which have already been asked in previous attempts CA final examinations. There you'll be able to extract and get to know that what kind of practical questions usually our institute asks in CA final level. So without further delay, we just mark the beginning of today's video presentation with the first topic, and that is Sharpe ratio. So guys, I'll just tell you about this ratio because most of the time it is being asked in the CA final examination with the help of the formula based questions. So guys, Sharpe ratio was basically developed by a Nobel laureate and his name was William Sharpe. Sharpe ratio basically finds a fund's excess return which is relative to its total risk as measured by its standard deviation. So that would be the Sharpe ratio was actually developed by the Nobel laureate William Sharpe. It simply says that it measures a fund's excess return relative to its total risk as measured by the Sharpe standard deviation. So to sum it up in a simple manner, I can just simply say that what is that excess return that you are able to extract out of the market in comparison to the total risk which you are taking. Total risks can simply be measured by standard deviation. Standard deviation is the measure for total risk. So what kind of excess return are you able to extract out of the market in comparison to the total risk you are taking? So that is simply the Sharpe ratio. Funds return minus risk-free rate. So we can say that is the excess return whole divided by its standard deviation whole divided by that is its risk. Sharpe ratio basically determines the amount of reward per unit of volatility an investors bear. So that's the simple kind of analogy what Sharpe ratio tells us. Higher the Sharpe ratio, better is the performance. So guys, Sharpe ratio, if I'll sum it up, I can simply say that Sharpe ratio is actually an appropriate measure of performance for the overall portfolio, particularly when it is compared to another portfolio or another index maybe, such as Standard & Poor's or CNX Nifty. If we'll be taking care of like mid-cap index, etc., we can have any kind of index benchmark for that matter. While a high and positive Sharpe ratio shows a superior risk-adjusted performance of the fund, a low and a negative Sharpe ratio is an indication of an unfavorable performance. So higher the Sharpe ratio, better is the performance. On the same notes, on the same model, basically, there came another man into the picture, and his name was Trainer. His full name is Jack L. Trainer. He is so called as one of the fathers of modern portfolio theory. Similar to Sharpe ratio, Trainer ratio basically measures a fund's excess return relative to risk. Here, there is a small catch in this. So guys, in case of Sharpe ratio, we used to have the standard deviation as to measure the risk. But in case of Trainer ratio, we'll be using beta instead of standard deviation to find out the kind of excess return per unit in terms of risk that we'll be extracting out of the market. So we can simply say that beta is a kind of funds volatility that is attributable to the market as a risk measurement. So Trainer ratio basically simply says for funds excess return whole divided by beta rather than going for standard deviation. So the Trainer ratio was named after Jack L. Trainer, one of the fathers of modern portfolio theory. Similar to the Sharpe ratio, the Trainer ratio measures a fund's excess return relative to risk. However, instead of using standard deviation to measure risk, it uses beta as a risk measurement. Trainer ratio can simply be put it as funds return less risk-free rate divided by beta, or I can say excess return divided by beta. And same is the case with trainer ratio as well, and that is higher the trainer ratio, better is the performance in such manner. So guys, in such a case, let's understand their kind of methodology. Both these famous persons actually have, Sharpe and Trainer. So let's go with their interrelated kind of concept. Just to ensure and absorb the particular details, we have to dig down a bit to know these theories in a better way. You can simply say that Sharpe and Trainer ratios, both of them, are extremely useful tools to measure the performance of a mutual fund. Most diversified funds give identified ranking when ranked under both the measures, mostly. But in order to create a point over here, I can simply say that if portfolios are less diversified, let's suppose the portfolios are less diversified, major holdings are being made only in smaller kind of companies only. Like the number of companies are pretty less, and we have bulk of the holdings to be made on that manner. And we can simply say that if the portfolios are less diversified, not much of the money has been invested in different areas. So we obviously have a conflict in ranking under Sharpe and Trainer. An investor who is using just one fund would use Sharpe ratio because he is more interested in standard deviation of the fund. However, an investor who has diversified his money across many other funds or assets would actually prefer Trainer ratio because he is more interested in beta, and Trainer measures uses beta for evaluation. So we can simply put it that way that the Trainer ratio usually focuses on reward relative to market risk that is measured by beta. However, in case of standard Sharpe ratio, we can simply say it is more concerned with the total risk, and that is market standard deviation. It implicitly assumes that a completely diversified portfolio, which means that the systematic risk is the relevant risk measure. However, in case of Trainer ratio, of different funds can be compared to determine which fund to include in already held well diversified portfolio. The ratio should not be used to make a decision whether to buy only fund A or fund B. It can simply be put that higher in such a case, higher a Trainer ratio, better is the performance. So always go for this aspect. If the portfolio is less diversified, okay, you can have the complete standard deviation in such a case. So, okay, you can just have that kind of linearity and you can simply go for Sharpe ratio in such a case. However, if a person is having a well diversified kind of portfolio, so definitely the market risk over there is directly resolved with beta. One doesn't have to go for the entire risk because with diversification, the unsystematic risk usually goes away. So that's the simple point which is being created by both these gentlemen, and we usually study about them as well. Apart from that, there was one other person whose name was Jensen. He basically derived a concept named Jensen's alpha. So what does Jensen's alpha talks about? We just studied to that. Alpha is named actually after Jensen. Alpha is the difference between actual return posted by the fund and the return posted by the benchmark portfolio with the same kind of risk. Let's suppose you invest somewhere, okay, and you receive something like 5 rupees. There is another person who invests something in the benchmark portfolio where many people are already investing and they get a return of, let's say, 4%. Hence, I can simply say that with the same kind of risk, you got a return which was 1 rupee extra to that man, or vice versa. It can be that way around. You got 4 rupees, he got 5 rupees with the kind of same risk. So alpha is basically the difference of actual return posted by the fund that you got and the return posted by the benchmark portfolio with the same kind of risk. Alpha basically takes care of these simple things. So I can simply say alpha is equivalent to actual return minus CAPM return. CAPM is the capital asset pricing model where we usually get the entire return taking into account the risk-free rate plus the market risk premium after multiplying the same with beta. So ER, that is expected return, equivalents to risk-free rate, the kind of rate which I'll be getting as like investing in FD, plus the kind of risk which I am taking up while investing in the stock market. I'll get beta for that matter. That is the risk. And what's that extra advantage that I'll be getting apart in comparison to my peers who are not investing in the stock market? So that will be market risk premium. It can be simply said that way. So you'll be getting a risk-free return. Maybe that would be like, okay, 6%, 7%, plus a beta of 1.5 and a market risk premium of like, let's say 2 rupees, 2%. So you can simply say that in that case, the expected rate of return would be 7 plus 3 and you'll be getting an expected return of 10%. So that is what alpha does. It simply is presumes like actual return, what you got, and the return which is being posted by the benchmark portfolio, that is the CAPM return. So what's the difference between the two? That is the alpha in this case. Alpha of 0 means the fund performed as expected, given the risk is it undertook, as reflected in the beta. Jensen's alpha represents the ability of the fund manager to achieve a return that is what could be expected given the risk in the fund. So we can simply sum it up that way, that an alpha of 0 means the fund performed as expected, the kind of risk which it undertook, reflected in the beta. A fund with a positive alpha in contrast with that would return more than the predicted kind of return by the beta. A negative alpha would mean that it has a return something less, which is expected than what is expected actually. So Jensen's alpha represents the ability of a fund manager to achieve a return that is above what could be expected given the risk in the fund. It is an absolute measure as opposed to Sharpe and Trainer measures, which are relative ones. Positive alphas represents good performance of the fund manager. Negative alphas reflect poor performance of the fund manager. Superior risk-adjusted returns indicate that the manager is good at something like predicting market turns, good predicting prediction over there, and selecting the undervalued issues for the portfolio or both maybe. But the limitation of this model is that it considers only systematic risk and not the entire risk which is associated with the fund. And an ordinary investor cannot mitigate unsystematic risk as his knowledge of the market is pretty primitive. So guys, that is the basic limitation about Jensen's alpha. Though the same doesn't prevail in the market because nowadays there is a lot of diversification available in the market, and there is actually superior access of entire information which is available on Google as well as the publications which are regularly made. Certainly, one while investing has to vouch out for these kind of information in order to set his investment in a very great manner. So that can be easily resolved. So that was all about Sharpe, Trainer, and Jensen's alpha. So let's move to the next topic, and that is comparison. So what's the comparison between Sharpe and Trainer ratio? That has like I briefed you up regarding the same things. Now I'll have that in my presentation, and that will be for a well diversified mutual funds. Okay, so there is a diversification, and that has been completely well diversified. So in that case, both Sharpe and Trainer can be used interchangeably. But in case of a non-diversified kind of mutual funds where non-diversification hasn't been made and a very well set up, in such a case, the Sharpe ratio will provide a more accurate ratio and a Trainer ratio should not be used. Because Sharpe ratio basically goes for the total kind of risk, and that is standard deviation. However, in case of Trainer ratio, that goes for only systematic risk, and that is beta, market risk. So it's always better to go in for Sharpe ratio because the portfolios are not very much diversified, and definitely they are having both kind of risk, systematic and unsystematic. So one has to look out for these kind of issues as well. However, in case it's a poorly diversified portfolio, could actually have a high ranking on the basis of trainer performance, but a much lower performance ranking on the basis of Sharpe performance measure. So that is the reason as to why Sharpe ratio should be used on a non-diversified mutual fund. A disadvantage of the Sharpe and trainer ratio measure is that they produce relative results and not absolute ranking on their portfolio performance. So for absolute kind of results, you will have to go for Jensen's Alpha rather than going for Sharpe and trainer. So that's their disadvantage. So the next topic comes into the picture: investment parameters for mutual fund companies under the SEBI regulation. So what are those investment parameters that are available for mutual fund companies under the SEBI regulations? And guys, these investment parameters need to be strictly followed. Number one comes into the picture, that is not more than 5% of the corpus as reflected by the NAV, net asset value, can be invested in unlisted shares or convertibles. So a mutual fund company cannot invest more than 5% of its entire capital in unlisted shares or unlisted convertibles. So that is the ceiling limit basically. So that threshold has been made. Along with that, one cannot invest more than 10% of the NAV in shares or convertibles of a single company. So I'll be just narrating you with the concept as well. So why it has included this 5% ratio, 5% thing, because the mutual fund companies cannot so that invest in unlisted shares. There are possible chances that the unlisted shares may not provide you a transparent and an unbiased kind of return. There might be a chances of some fraud going on in any of the company. So let's suppose tomorrow I have a mutual fund company and I invest more than 50% in just one single unlisted share company. So the company which is not having its share listed in the market, there might be a chance that the audited balance sheet for that matter may tell us on a later stage that there was some fraud which was going on in the company and mutual fund company was not having any idea about the same. And in such a case, investors are going to suffer at extreme bad angles. So that has to be taken care of. So guys, that is why this limit of 5% has been made. Also, in case of this 10%, supposedly there is a mutual fund who is investing like 50% in one company and 50% in one company. And tomorrow, let's suppose somehow that one company suffers big time losses. So we can simply sum it up like that complete mutual fund scheme is going to fall at a very bad angle, right? Because certainly that one company has already incurred big time losses or has gone bankrupt. So in that case, investors are going to lose pretty bad in such a scenario because of that decision of mutual fund scheme to invest in just two companies. So that is why it is being told that not 10% of the NAV can be invested in more than in a single company in such a manner. Then comes into the picture that the total investment in unrated debt instruments shall not exceed 25% of the NAV. Same is the case with this as well. Unrated debt instruments cannot be like vouched out for their effectiveness and their kind of debt and the percentage of coupon they are paying all the time because they are unrated. So it is always recommended to invest more on the rated debt instruments rather than unrated. But if a mutual fund company decides to invest in unrated one, so it has a ceiling limit that not 25% not more than 25% can be invested in an unrated debt instrument. So it has to be taken care of. Plus, no mutual fund under all its schemes can hold more than 10% of the company's share capital or voting rights. This is another condition which is primarily similar to the one which is being told in condition number 2. Plus, the mutual funds can now invest overseas up to $3 billion because this right has been provided only up to a limited extent just to ensure that someday tomorrow you wake up and you just got to know that a foreign company just fall and went bankrupt and you were actually not having any kind of idea. So just to avoid those kind of circumstances and situations, the mutual fund companies, the SEBI regulations have actually imposed a ceiling, and that is one can invest in overseas companies up to a limit of $3 billion. And last but not the least, mutual fund companies must adhere to know your customer norms. So guys, those were the investment parameters for mutual fund companies under SEBI regulation. 5% for unlisted shares, 10% max for single company shares, 25% max in unrated uh, debt instruments, 10% maximum of the company's share capital or voting rights, $3 billion maximum in overseas company, and complete adherence to KYC norms. So let's jump on to next topic of ours, and that is systematic withdrawal plan. So let's understand what does this systematic withdrawal plan means. So guys, a systematic withdrawal plan allows the investors to receive a regular income while still maintaining their investment's growth potential. An investor can use a SWP to supplement the income they are receiving from any other source. So that's the added advantage in such a case. Plus, SWP, I will simply sum it up as SWP, that is systematic withdrawal plan. It includes a convenient payout options and has several tax advantages for you. Plus, there is another benefit, that is the investor can choose to withdraw from the capital appreciation in the NAV without affecting the principal amount, a fixed amount every month or quarter or any amount thereafter. So guys, this is basically systematic withdrawal plan. So it's exactly on the same notes or like similar notes as to what systematic investment plan that is usually you can find out on the hoardings which are available in the metro stations. Start investing. SIP is now very low. You can start your investment in mutual funds with just 500 rupees SIP. You must have actually vouched out for these kind of advertisements which are available on the metro station boards. So what is this? That is basically systematic investment plan, SIP. Same goes with that systematic withdrawal plan, SWP. So it allows an investor to receive a regular kind of income without while maintaining uh, their investment's growth potential as well. So they allow this to supplement any kind of income they are receiving from any other source. So that's an added advantage. Plus, they have the convenient payout options. They can easily walk out as and whenever they want. Plus, it has several tax advantages to invest in these kind of schemes as well. So this was all about systematic withdrawal plan. So now let's discuss the last topic of this chapter, and that is systematic investment plan. A SIP is a feature specifically designed for those who are interested in building wealth over long term and plan out a better future. The SIP allows the investors to save a fixed amount of rupees every month for the purchase of additional units. Anyone can enroll for this facility by starting an account with a nominal amount of rupees 100 and giving post-dated checks of providing debit instructions through ACS of periodic investment every month for a specified period based on month's convenience. So simply that can be done. It was previously like 100 rupees. You just have to start your account with 100 rupees. Plus, you can deposit 500 rupees per month to in order to make your SIP go on like that. And certainly, don't try to withdraw that amount. That's like a kind of saving which you are putting just to ensure that your future is safe enough. So let's discuss about the possibility what you can generate over here. So if today I'm investing like 6,000 rupees a year, 500 rupees per month, and this will likely to go and that man, it will go on like that. So after 20 years, 30 years down the line, you'll be having such kind of money that you wouldn't have even imagined. Why I'm saying so? Because there is a best thing which is available in the market, and that is the eighth wonder of this world, and that is compounding. You don't have any kind of idea about this, the advantage of compounding. So 1 becomes 1.1. So if you will be extracting out like 10 over from there, 1 will remain 1. But if you will not be extracting any kind of 0.10% from that, then 1.1 will become 1.21 rather than 1.20. So that is the basic advantages of compounding. And with this, I'll be saying a thank you on behalf of Edupedia World. Keep interacting, guys. Stay connected. Help us to know your needs better. And that's why I'll say goodbye to you. Love you guys. Take care. Bye.